Welcome back to this episode of Seeking Proof, Finding Grace. I'm your host, Ron Campbell, and this week, as with every week, I want to start off by reminding you of the most important truth in the entire universe. God loves you. Now, last week, we started off on this journey. Remember, we've had a couple of miracles that we've looked at, and the first was the cosmological argument related to this question of where did the universe come from? Something, well, everything out of nothing. And we determined ultimately that the best answer to that question was an independent third party. The second one that we looked at was the teleological argument, which is this question of the fine-tuning of the universe. And in looking at that, we determined again that we see the fingerprint of intelligence with the fine-tuning of the universe. And so again, an independent third party seems to be the best answer as we look at those. Again, lots of episodes previous to that you can go take a look at. We've now moved into the third part of our journey. And the third part of our journey takes us from the Big Bang, the beginning of the universe, whether you want to call it the Big Bang or God creating the universe, whatever that creation event was, all the way up to Earth. Now, what I proposed last week and what we're looking at is, obviously we don't want to have a God of the gap situation where we don't know what's going on and there were some things that seem really hard. They could just be really lucky, but we're going to say God did that every time we run into something that we find is, the odds are a little steep on. And we agree, we're not going to do that. But what if, at many steps along the way, what we determined was that this universe is the exact opposite of what I was led to believe while watching Star Wars or Star Trek or Stargate, any one of many of my favorite shows, that this isn't the Copernican ideal, that life is simple and life is easy and the universe is just friendly to life all over the place. What if the conditions for life are enormously demanding? And what we find is that our little blue planet in this amazing solar system with a remarkable sun in an amazingly perfect spot in a remarkable galaxy is incredibly unique. And there isn't just a few, there are dozens on top of dozens of remarkably lucky events that got us to where we are today. How many lucky events would it take before you finally became convinced that this too raises to the level of the first two miracles? And what we have on our hands here is the third miracle being this journey to Earth. I want to have you watch as we go along because it's starting to add up a little bit. Last week we talked about three stars forming, in the early first generation of stars forming, stars acting like a furnace and creating all of those heavy elements that we need to get us in later generations of stars. And finally, stars dying in just the right way. We started to lay some found work, but we've only got three items. Yes, they're remarkably unlikely, and we talked about Fred Hoyle's discovery and how remarkably unlikely it was for the production of carbon within the first generations of stars. But we're now going to move this forward, and we're going to jump into the Milky Way Galaxy, our home, and we're going to look at how unlikely is it that we find ourselves in this particular galaxy, in this particular spot. And today we begin that journey, so let's jump in and take a look at it. Now, the Milky Way Galaxy is a special kind of galaxy. It's a spiral galaxy, and there's different types of galaxies out there. Spiral are quite common, but it's not just the type of galaxy that's unique. It's many things about our galaxy that are unique, and let's talk about that as we go forward. I like starting off with this quote from The Privileged Planet by Doctors Gonzales and Richards. They said, "Size, age, type, and metallicity all conspired to drastically reduce the number of galaxies capable of harboring not only life, but even terrestrial planets. Our Milky Way is among the 2% most luminous and hence most metal-rich galaxies in the local universe, putting it way ahead on the scale of habitability." Okay, so what does that mean? We're going to hear that term, metal rich. We're going to hear that term. And what I want you to think about, again, we'll pop up the picture there of the galaxy above us. There's our galaxy in the Milky Way. You can see the bright shining middle of the galaxy. Well, that bright, shining middle of the galaxy is where all the construction materials are that we're going to need for us. On its own, you need something special to have a planet like Earth that's a rocky planet. We're not a gas giant. We're a rocky planet. And we have an abundance of materials necessary, like carbon, like iron, things like that, these heavier elements that are needed for life to exist. Where do those things come from? Well, again, it's going to be that bright and shining center to the galaxy. You need, and remember, this is what we talked about last week, you need those stars. You need those early generations of stars producing just the right things. That you need them. It's the Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards of the galaxy. That's where all the good stuff is in the middle. The problem is you don't want to live there. It's not where you want to be, because that bright and shining center of the galaxy comes with its own set of risks. There's lots of radiation there. There's lots of unfriendly things in that bright and shining center of the galaxy that's going to make your life rather difficult if that's where you reside. But what you want is a spiral-shaped galaxy. And the reason why, you notice those spiral arms coming out. We live on one of those arms, the Orion arm. You want to be far enough away from the middle that all of that radiation, all of that unpleasant stuff going on in the middle, you're far enough away from it, from collisions with other stars, from all sorts of ugliness that goes on there. That's like party central. You don't want to be anywhere near that. You want all the goodies from it, but you don't want to live there. And so a spiral galaxy is very important because it gives you a place to be on the outer edges of the galaxy, but close enough that you can still get to the goodies. So you need those construction materials, you need all those goodies to make up us, but at the same time, you don't want to be located anywhere near it. So other types of galaxies, elliptical galaxies or irregular galaxies, they're not going to work well for life because they don't have that ability that spiral galaxies do to be able to get far enough away from that shining center of the galaxy to be at a safe distance. So again, we want a spiral galaxy. Here's another quote. This one's from Dr. Hugh Ross's book, Improbable Planet. Only in a spiral galaxy is a long history of life possible. A spiral galaxy of just the right size and just the right structure can yield adequate heavy elements for life, as well as a possible location where the planetary system can reside for billions of years without being exposed to deadly radiation and without gravitational disruptions from adjacent stars and molecular clouds. So it's what he's talking about there. We need a safe place to be, but we also need a place where we can get to those building materials for life. So it's going to be this interesting combination of things that we need, and only in a spiral galaxy are we going to find that that's possible. You also want to be in a galaxy that's just the right age. So again, that's this Goldilocks idea. Not too old, not too young, but just right. So what does that mean? Well, a galaxy that's too young, again, you're not going to have had time for those construction materials that you need to form. You're not going to have time for all of the bumping around and maneuvering that's going on in an early galaxy to take place. Remember, you want that galaxy to be well formed. You want those spiral arms to be well shaped where you can get far enough away from the center to be in a good safe spot. But you don't want it to be too old either, because in any one of these situations, those spiral arms that are so important that you can see there in the picture over my shoulder, those spiral arms will eventually start to fray. They'll start to come apart. Anything like that, eventually wear and tear, it just start to slowly drift apart a little bit. Eventually that'll happen to the Milky Way Galaxy. But if you've been there too long, you're going to start losing the effect of those spiral arms. They're going to start fraying, or they're going to start breaking apart. And as that happens, again, what you need for life to be sustained is slowly going to start to pull itself apart. So you need a spiral galaxy. And you need a spiral galaxy that's not too old, it's not too young, it's just the right age. But you also need a spiral galaxy that's not too big and not too small. It's kind of a demanding set of requirements here. Let's talk about why for a minute. You don't want a galaxy that's too small. Too small is going to mean a galaxy that doesn't have those raw materials that you need for life. You need a galaxy that's big enough to produce those materials, But at the same time, you don't want a galaxy that's too big. When you start running into galaxies that are too big, it kind of leads into our next issue. So again, you want a spiral galaxy, not too old, not too young, not too small, but you don't want something too big either, because you need a galaxy that resides in a cluster of galaxies. Let me talk about why for a minute. A galactic cluster. And this is from Dr. Hugh Ross's book again, Improbable Planet. For a long history of life to be possible, life's host galaxy must reside within a grouping of galaxies that includes no supergiant clusters, no supergiant galaxies, and remains distant from any dense cluster. Think about it from this perspective. If you've got too much density, too many stars and things like that, again, your neighbors are not... Nobody wants to live right on top of their neighbors. You want to live in a good neighborhood, and you don't want your neighbors too far away or too close. Too far away, from a galaxy perspective, it's lonely, and you don't want that. But too close, you get things bumping into each other. And by things, I mean other planets and asteroids and things like that. We've all seen Armageddon. We all know how that works out. It's bad. The group must contain a sufficiently high availability of dwarf galaxies, we'll talk about that later, to ensure that this one special spiral galaxy can accrete enough gas from the dwarf galaxies to sustain its spiral structure for many billions of years. The number and density of dwarf galaxies must not be so high, however, as to generate any significant disturbing or warping of the host galaxy's spiral arms. Also, the group must be sufficiently dispersed that large and medium-sized galaxies cause no disruption to the symmetry, size, or shape of the host galaxy. There's a couple of different requirements in there. You need to be part of a galactic cluster. It sounds a little bit cannibalistic, but you need your galaxy. We need our Milky Way Galaxy to be able to feed on dwarf galaxies to be able to sustain itself. So you need a supply of dwarf galaxies. That's yet another thing. But that's why you need this cluster. You need a cluster, and you don't want it to be too big and crowded, because again, crowding is dangerous. But you need those dwarf galaxies as well in there to be able to supply the ingredients needed for your spiral galaxy to grow. So the list keeps getting longer and longer as we go through this. You need a spiral galaxy, not too big, not too small, not too young, not too old. It sounds like some of the board books we used to read the kids when they were little. You need to be in a galactic cluster, not too big, not too small, and you need dwarf galaxies and stars to feed your galaxy. The list of things just keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think you get the idea. The type of galaxy is tremendously important. And we've talked about just a few of those, that shopping list of things that we need, so that the Milky Way turns out to be a very special galaxy indeed. But it doesn't quite stop there. Our location, you notice, here's a different map. That's our location out on the Orion arm of our galaxy. Now, when you look at that spot, the interesting thing is, we didn't always start there. And let's talk about a couple of different things. Number one, you notice that our galaxy it's disc-shaped. Again, it's not an elliptical galaxy that looks more like an egg. It's more shaped like a disc. You want to be on the galactic plane. You don't want to be too high and you don't want to be too low. You want to be more towards the middle of the galactic plane to, again, protect our solar system from radiation coming out of other different parts of the galaxy. We happen to be located, I guess horizontally you might say, in exactly the right spot to provide optimal protection for life. Maybe most amazingly of all in this process is that spot where you see us sitting there in the Orion arm inside of the Milky Way Galaxy. There's significant evidence to indicate that that's not always where we've been. Our little solar system seems to be very well blessed with all of the building blocks that we need, far more than we should have to make life possible here on this little rocky blue planet of ours. So much so that scientists have theorized that at one point in time or another, our little solar system was much closer to that shining center of the galaxy that we don't want to be anywhere near. But early on, we were exposed to just the right types of radiation, just the right types of supernova explosions to produce the kinds of materials that we need to make our solar system friendly for life, And then at some point, we must have moved from the center of the galaxy all the way out to where we are. Now, it's not a big deal to hop in the car and run to Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards to go do a grocery run for all the building projects that you're going to need, like groceries, whatever you're shopping for, to make a run for all the building materials that you're going to need for your project. That's pretty straightforward. But it's straightforward because we hop in the car, we drive ourselves to the store, we get what we need, and we drive home. It's not that simple with a solar system. At some point, the entire solar system is believed to have moved from the shining center of the galaxy to where we are today. How does that work? You would think anything that could move our solar system with enough force to move it out could have ripped the solar system apart, could have pushed it to where it just kept going and flew right out of the galaxy as we know it and been drifted off into space. It seems like every way possible other than landing in the most ideal spot for life in the Milky Way Galaxy is the better answer. But somehow our little solar system apparently moved from the shining center of the galaxy to the safe spot that we are today. Apparently we decided to upgrade and move to the suburbs at some point. How does that happen? But amazingly and miraculously, that's where we seem to find ourselves. So in comparison to the Copernican theory that life is easy and everything is good, we have a remarkable series of things that mean the Milky Way is incredibly special and unique for life. And our position in it is remarkable. Not only that we seem to be in such an amazingly safe spot, but at some point we were exactly where we needed to be to get the materials to build life here on Earth, and then we moved to that safe spot, which again seems remarkably unlikely. And along the way, we started with 3 unlikely things last week, and they seem to be piling up on us one after another after another. We're going to keep a running total as we go forward, but I think this is a good place to stop as we start to get into looking at our little solar system. But where we find ourselves in this very special galaxy is rather unique indeed. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Next week we're going to jump in, we're going to take a little break, and we're going to talk about Easter, one of the most important times of year, if not the most important time of year. And then we'll jump back into this in the weeks to come. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, I hope you'll consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button, the like for this episode and the subscribe for this channel. You can find our podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you'd like to reach out to us, you can reach us via email at proof2grace@yahoo.com. You can also find us on our website at proof2grace.com. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Please join us next Sunday as we talk about the Easter miracle. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.